A Summer League recap for the Southwest Division. 2 top 4 picks, a team that made the Summer League championship game. And none of them employed Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am Brat. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and get $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available to double bang on all platforms, so I want you to double bang. I want you to thumb it up, when you leave your comments, you listen to an audio, you watch the video, and we get some info on the Summer League stuff that did go down. Dynasty rookie ranking update coming later this week. So, what are we here to do? Well, we are here to talk about the Southwest Division, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, the 3 Texas teams, and then the 2 teams that could easily be in the Eastern Conference, the Memphis Grizzlies and the New Orleans Pelicans, who are obviously very far east. And when the NBA expands, there's no guarantee that they even move to the east because Minnesota still exists. So we're talking Southwest. Some really interesting performances here. Maybe some players, and almost definitely some players that do have some regular season fantasy redraft impact. Maybe not the ones that you think, but there are definitely going to be some guys, I think, out of this division, and we saw the performances of Summer League, that we'll have to pay attention to throughout the season. Let's start with a team that we probably don't have to pay massive amounts of attention to in terms of their young players. It is the Dallas Mavericks. They did, of course, make it through all the way through to the NBA Finals. We're well aware of that, but this Mavericks team was lacking a little bit on intriguing prospects. That's not a surprise. That happens when your team is quite good, and Dallas has been one of those teams that just hasn't always had the most intriguing prospects. Of course, Luka Doncic was a pretty intriguing prospect when that happened. The guy that was probably garnering the most attention was the big fella, Olivier-Maxence Prosper, and he was fine. He played 29 minutes. He averaged 14 and 4 with 3 assists and 1.4 steals. But he shot, like so many do in Summer League, 24% from 3, 37% from the field. He averaged 28 fantasy points. He was 87th in -1. I wouldn't say there's a clear role for him. Derek Jones left, but Najee Marshall enters into that role. Maybe he's a backup if Maxi Kleber struggles and PJ Washington gets hurt, but we'd want him to take a big step forward. But the faith it's dropping a little bit. Not that I had gigantic faith in Prosper to begin with anyway, because he was one of those guys, I look at the size, he's a defensive player with no defensive stats, and that's, the steals here are really good. I'm not sure he ever turns into a scoring guy, but almost, if he had to put up actually good shooting numbers, we would have had to have the discussion about, but look who's on the team, because he's running at 24.5 usage, which is not super high, but for a player like Prosper, it is. So it was fine, but absolutely nothing that gave me sort of any level of excitement about where his prospects are or any sort of role for him in the upcoming season. The rest of their team also pretty nondescript. 4 of those guys, actually that's not true, 3 of these players that I've got on my list of 5 guys here are on the roster, but it's a little Nixian, whereas the back 5 guys of the roster, you go, they're not NBA players, and that's sort of where I think we should feel, or how we should feel about this Mavericks team. AJ Lawson, feels like he's been around forever. He's only 24. He averaged 18 points, in his 28 minutes with 5 rebounds and 1.2 steals, but he shot 29% from 3. Brandon Williams, his numbers are actually pretty good. He is almost 25, though. He was 61st in -1. He averaged 27 fantasy points, 16 points with 4.5 assists and 1.5 steals. But, there's Jaden Hardy, there's Quentin Grimes, there's Spencer Dinwiddie now, there's Kyrie, there's Luka. There's no real place for him. Melvin Ajinça was their second-round pick, their only draft pick, actually, at pick number 51. At this point, he hasn't signed a contract, and I don't think that he's necessarily going to come across this season. And the numbers here would suggest that maybe that's going to be all right. 322nd ranked player in -1, 7 points a game, 2 rebounds, 0.6 steals, 20% shooting. That's not exciting. He is 20. He played 22 minutes a night. Nothing that I'm excited about with the Jinsa for this upcoming season. Probably needs, maybe he develops into nothing. But nothing here, maybe, that's exciting. I don't think he's playing this year. Alex Fudge is on this team. He played 13 minutes a night. He had 4 points and 3 rebounds. And honestly, what the hell else do I need to say about Fudgy? And then there's Emmanuel Miller, who was a little bit surprising to me that A, he went undrafted, and B, he didn't sign a two-way, but he is 24. He was played for TCU and Texas Tech before that, so a little bit of a Texas legend. 8 and 6 in his 22 minutes. He shot 38% from 3. He's more of a sort of a 3-4 player, and maybe some of the shooting could be real. Like, that could work out, but long way to go. Not even on a two-way at this point. But I like him a little bit more than I like a Brandon Williams, for example, or even an Alex Fudge, or even an AJ Lawson. But he's a little bit older, Emmanuel Miller. So I'm not thinking that we need to get... I don't think we need to get our hopes up particularly high. You get your hopes up high, though, for some players on this team, and that is the Houston Rockets, because we got the player who looked like the best prospect at Summer League, at least for the rookies, Reed Sheppard. Now, I had Sheppard at number 3 overall on my board. I may move him to 2. He was in Tier 1 for my Dynasty rookie ranks. He will definitely stay in Tier 1. He had some really, really good performances in Summer League. He averaged 20 points a game in 33 minutes. He was the 5th ranked -1 player, 4th on Yahoo, averaging 41 fantasy points. 5 assists, almost 3 steals, 1.3 blocks. And one of the big selling points of Sheppard coming out of college was, A, he shot 50% from 3, which we all know was never going to hold. And he only hit 28% on his threes in Summer League. We know that 3-point percentage doesn't carry over Summer League to NBA. He was never going to be a 50% shooter. In fact, he's probably not going to be a 40% shooter, at least this season. But one thing that was apparent for Sheppard at Kentucky is, A, that he was mismanaged by John Calipari. But B, is that Kentucky guards are underrated. And C, the defensive stuff. That's what's interesting. And his hands were on full display. Super quick hands, 2.8 steals and 1.3 blocks for a guy that's 6'3" in shoes is a crazy number. And it wasn't fluky. You watch him play, you go, oh, yeah, I see this. It makes sense. His passing was pretty good. It is hard to shine as a passer in Summer League. His shooting, I liked that he was taking the shots, but again, we didn't really get them to go in. But what I did like is the fact that he played limited minutes in Kentucky, but here we went, all right, let's go. Like, usage up, 26%. That's good. He's not the guy that I think we need to be looking at in redraft leagues. There are just too many players in front of him. He might be a good prospect, and he is. He is 20, and Fred VanVleet is awesome. And Amen Thompson exists, and Jalen Green is still there. So Reed is the 4th guard at this point. There will be moments if a lot of injuries hit and he plays that we will use him for fantasy if he finds 27 minutes a night. But at the moment, he's got no hope of doing that. They're not going to say, well, all right, Fred, you're playing 20 a night. Amen, don't worry about it. Jalen benched. This is not going to happen immediately. We watch what Reed does, and maybe he becomes so irrepressible that old mate Ime Udoka has no other choice. But I don't think that's going to be the case. He was great. He firmly established himself to be in the discussion, to be the best prospect in the draft, and to be a number 1 pick in fantasy dynasty rookie drafts. I don't think there's any, I don't think that's a terrible decision if that's the way that you want to go. This Rockets team, which is also impressive about what Sheppard did, had a lot of other NBA type players on it. Well, in particular, like Cam Whitmore. Whitmore, not really sure why he was out there. He averaged 41 fantasy points. So big points league numbers. 31st in -1. 16 points a game, 7 rebounds. What I am impressed with is 4 assists for Whitmore, who's not the most dynamic passer. He also averaged 3 steals, and that's one of the things that he has been good at, is getting steals, scoring, usage, 26%. His shooting numbers are a little off. Whitmore was in the thing where as second-year player, we're going to do a bunch of stuff that you probably don't do at the NBA level. So I'm not going to read huge amounts into it, but the man shot 7% on threes. 7. Not 17, not 70, 7. Overall, he shot 38% and only 68 from the line, but he got to the line a ton. And that was one of his strengths at Villanova as well. There's some interesting things. I don't think Whitmore is going to be a draftable player this year, honestly, as well, because you're going to have Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith playing the 3 and the 4, and Tari Eason playing the 3 and the 4. So Whitmore will probably get 20 a night, but he's not supplanting Smith, I don't think. I don't think he's supplanting Brooks. I'd like him to. but just another year of sort of developing and seeing where it goes. Long term, he's going to be good, I think. And I was sort of impressed with some of the things he did here. Interestingly, Cam is actually younger than Reed Sheppard. That's it's an interesting little tidbit. But overall, he was good, but not anything that changes my super opinion of him long term, or even for this season. Orlando Robinson was the standout center on this team, waived by Miami, and he's still not on the Rockets roster, but I wanted to highlight him because he was good. And their backup center position consists of the big fella, Jacques Landale. Jeff Green is there as well. Steven Adams is a guy that we all forget about. He's the backup center, but Robinson could find a way onto the roster. He averaged 14 and 9. He shot 59%. He hit half a three a game. He is an NBA rotation player. And whether it's here or somewhere else, we need to keep an eye on that. AJ Griffin came across in a trade draft day, I think it was. This is his third season. Last year was a pretty lost year for him. He's not even 21 yet, Griffin. He was fine. 28% on threes is not good, though, when that's your calling card skill as a third-year player. And again, as a third-year player, even though he's not yet 21. Interesting thing, 3 years younger than Terrence Shannon Jr. Always remember that. 2 years younger than Tristan Da Silva. Always remember these ages are very weird. Griffin didn't establish himself. 1.2 steals, 0.8 blocks is fine, but 38% shooting, low volume, low usage, no passing. And we talk about Whitmore and Eason having these backup forward roles. Where the hell does Griffin play? Well, the answer is nowhere. He's going to be like the 12th, 13th man on this roster. Nate Williams Jr., also known as Jonathan Williams, was in Portland a couple of years ago, and then Houston two-way last year, barely played. He's 28. He was fine as a big man. He was all right. 13 and 5 with a steal, but I don't really think there's an NBA player in there. Jermaine Samuel's also one of those guys who was on the Rockets last year but barely played. And then the new two-way signing, N'Faly Dante from Oregon. Big man, but he started, but he was clearly outplayed by Orlando Robinson. Dante played only 13 minutes a night, 4 points, 5 rebounds, 0.8 blocks. So the blocks are nice. He's an athletic player. He is older as well. What's he, 23? This team had some weird players on it, like Trevor Keels, Nate Hinton, Kyra Lewis. Who else on this? Mike Miles Jr. He was a guy that I liked as a draft prospect 2 years ago. But Dante didn't really establish himself. I'm pretty much out on AJ Griffin. Loved Whitmore, loved Reed, and Orlando Robinson. Just someone I think we keep just a little bit of an eye on. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, meaning that when you're looking to go to a baseball game, Game Time is the place that you got to go. And one of the things that Game Time offers is the way that the pricing adjusts as you get closer to game time. Hence the name. It drops. Pricing drops. They want you to go to these things. Even after the game started, they'll chuck these flash deals, chuck an alert on your phone and go, hey, game's on. You want to go down? Cheap price. Bang, you're there. Look at the views from your seat as well. They've got the zone deals. We take the hassle out of choosing the ticket. You just tell them a vague area. I'll sit here. And they find the right ticket, the right price that suits what you need to do. It's not just baseball. It's sports, it's comedy, it's theater, it's musicals, it's whatever. Game Time has access to those tickets and gets you those great deals. So take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets on Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, so that is 2 teams done as we're covering the Southwest Division Summer League recap. Don't forget, check out Locked On Sports Today across on YouTube, 24/7 live stream of shows that make sense with people who know what they're talking about and aren't just screaming at you on the TV, inventing discussions that just don't need to be had. Who's the GOAT? Who cares? Can the Yankees win? Don't care. Locked on Sports Today over on YouTube. Okay. So what we're talking about here is we've gone through those 2 teams, Dallas and Houston. Let's go to Memphis, the team that did make the Summer League championship game. And in the end, they lost to Miami. But there's a lot to look at with this squad because there were a lot of NBA-ish players or players that you would know from playing fantasy last season because the Grizzlies ran through a million different lineups with all their injuries/injuries. Let's start with the man I want to highlight here, and that is Bishop Jackson II. He's in my radar now. Well, not necessarily him, but the way that he gets named GG Jackson because he's not GG Jackson the second. He's Gregory Jackson the second because his dad is Gregory Jackson the first. His dad is not called GG. His dad's nickname is Bishop. So if we're going to use nicknames, then he's Bishop Jackson the second. He's not GG the second. And I will go on about this forever. It is so easy to get right. GG Jackson or Greg Jackson the second. Simple. Anyway, as for GG, don't worry. When we talk about Bronny, I'm going to go off on that one as well. GG, 20 points, 2.5 threes, shot 30% from three and under 40% from the field. He was 18th in points leagues across Summer League, 34 fantasy points, 2 assists, 0.9 steals. He GG'd, and I don't know what more to say about that. He got good usage, 28%. He scored well. The shooting numbers were weird. They were bad. And he's not going to have a role this season. And by a role, I mean he'll play some minutes, but a lot of people are thinking, well, he'll be their starter. No, he won't. No. It's Ja Morant. It's Desmond Bane. It's Jaren Jackson. It's probably Zach Edey. I guess you could say maybe GG starts, but honestly, like Vince Williams is a better player than him. Marcus Smart is going to start at the 3. Maybe you say Jaren starts at center. I don't think he will, but even then, Brandon Clark could play next to him. GG is just, he's very raw. Now, I say all of this. The man is 19 and a half years old. 19 and a half. He is 3 years younger than Zach Edey. He is 6 months younger than Reed Sheppard. He's younger than Cam Whitmore even. He's ridiculously young. But he is not having a role this season that would be commensurate with even considering him in standard league fantasy drafts. It's just not going to happen unless a million injuries strike him down. And while he scored well and took on the nice usage load giggity like he did for the team last season, it didn't translate to fantastic fantasy numbers, and it's not going to do it this year either. So it was good to see him do it. I still have faith in him long term, although I do think that the overall fantasy game is much more skewed towards points leagues because of the inefficiency, because of the, I don't know if it's inability or what it is about accumulating other numbers. He is a guy that gets talked up a lot, and I don't think that it's going to really make any sense for him this season. There were a lot of guys on this team, though. Jake LaRavia, who was a bust in the NBA the first couple of years, and then last year down the stretch, he started to play really well. And then again here, he had 28 minutes, 18 and 4 with 3 steals and 2 threes and hit 33% of his threes. Like, they're pretty good numbers. But would you argue, or could you argue, that LaRavia even has a shot at being in the rotation ahead of GG Jackson? You could. Like, Jake's not even 23 yet. Like, he's still young. He's really starting to come into his own, I think, as a solid rotation player. What about Zach Edey? Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to see Zach Edey play live because he didn't play. Sprained his ankle and then didn't play. Edey played 2 games, 21 minutes, 10 and 9, 2.5 blocks. What is interesting is one of the queries that I had about Edey was defense. He blocked the shots nicely, but how would he go from 33% usage down to, 15 usage? And we sort of saw that. It is only 2 games, but 17% usage is really low. And that's sort of what's going to have to happen to him in the NBA. I don't think he's going to be able to play 25 plus minutes this season, but like we saw with Derek Lively for category leagues last season, he doesn't need to have an impact as a rookie. I think he'll be a 22-minute-a-night player and he'll rebound well. He'll block some shots. He'll score okay, but out of the guys we've talked about, like a Reed Sheppard, who I love way more as a prospect, or even a Cam Whitmore, or a GG Jackson, I think Edey is the guy that we can consider as a standard league draftable player. I think he will start. But again, they've got Clark, they've got Vince Williams who can play the 4 and moving Jackson to the 5. That doesn't mean that Zach plays 39. And the fact that he suffered 2 ankle sprains in Summer League is not ideal. He never got injured in college, but of course, as we know, that doesn't mean anything, does it? So Edey was solid enough. I probably will bump him a little bit just because the role looks to be pretty good. But overall, I'm still not enamored with what he is as a prospect. I loved Scott Pippen. Pippen was great down the stretch last season for the Grizzlies, and he showed again that he needs to be on a real contract. He is only on a 2-way with the Grizzlies. I firmly believe that will get turned into a full contract later in the season. He played 31 minutes a night. He scored 21 points, 8 assists, 3.3 steals. And you know what? You go, that's summer league. Yeah, he did that. Not to that degree, but that is exactly what he did in the NBA. He gets steals. He gets assists. He doesn't shoot well, 29% from 3. But he hit his free throws. He was 45% overall. 21 points a game. He was awesome. The second-ranked player in -1 category ranks through Summer League. First in points leagues, averaging 47 a game. Unfortunately, Morant and Marcus Smart are going to get the point guard minutes. And he's only on a two-way. But this is one that we go and we hold on to and go, there is something maybe here. The downside is that he's going to be 24 when the season starts. But I think that the Grizzlies have unearthed a real rotation player that if he needs to start in any sort of scenario, you'd be like, that's okay. I feel okay. I feel pretty good about Scott Pippen. And he dominated here, as you should. Cam Spencer and Jalen Wells, they're 2 second-round picks, and we talked a lot about this at draft time, how they were just going for shooting, and they did. Spencer's already 24, but he hit 2.5 threes, and he hit them at 53%. Possibly the best shooter in the draft, possibly. Jalen Wells, also possibly the best shooter in the draft. 37% shooting from 3. He hit 2 threes a game with 13 points and a steal. But these guys, that's what they do. They are shooting specialists. I think Wells over Spencer is a very clear, what the way you want to prioritize it. Wells is 21, Spencer's 24. Spencer might be able to find those minutes on this Grizzlies team, but they're also probably bringing back Luke Kennard, which you don't want 3 Luke Kennards getting minutes every night. But that gives you that clear path into guys like Wells and Spencer. Again, I think Wells is the better play because he's 21. But they did what they wanted to do. They did what you needed them to do. They looked like they belonged in that sort of role, and it was great. The other one we talk about is Trey Jemison because he started games last season. He's almost 25. He averaged 9 and 6 in 26 minutes. Maybe he gets some sort of backup role behind Edie, but of course, like I said, Jaren will play backups, will play center at times, and Brandon Clark will play minutes at center too. And Jemison, I don't really think is a significant NBA prospect or anything along those lines. But yeah, he was there, and we saw him play quite a bit last season. But this team, again, a lot of guys that we heard of last season. Timmy Allen, DeJon Jarreau, the big fella. A lot of interesting guys, at least we did know their names. Let's go to the New Orleans Pelicans, a summer league team with some interesting things because this real-life Pelicans team, the non-summer league team, doesn't really have a center. And they drafted a center at pick 21, Yves Missi. And, was he going to be able to start? Well, we'll figure that out in a sec. Because I would posit it this way. I would say that there is a chance that a rookie center on this Pelicans Summer League team starts. And I would say it's more closer to being Carlo Matkovic than it is Yves Missi. Matkovic was a late second-round pick in the 50s 2 years ago. At the end of last season, you may not have known this, but he sought a buyout with his European team in a weird time. It's like March or something, and tried to come over and get the Pelicans to sign him last season. It didn't happen, but he showed his intention. And now the Pelicans have signed him, not to a two-way, to a real contract. Matkovic, as you can see on these numbers, 76th ranked player, -1 rankings. He only played 18 minutes a night, but he averaged 11 and 4 with 2 blocks and 2 assists. And every time I watch the Pelicans play, and I watched 2 full games of them, he was very clearly the best big man there. He also almost tried to single-handedly bring back the Raise the Roof celebration, which I'm here for. Bring it back, my guy. He blocked shots. Only 29% on threes, but he took them. 24 usage. And the options for the Pelicans are Daniel Tice and Yves Missi. We want to watch that really carefully, what David Griffin says. And Griffin has said we're not looking to trade for a center, so that's interesting. And then they signed Matkovic. We watched through Media Day. We watched through preseason. If he starts games in preseason, Matkovic, like game 1, I'll draft him last round. Because, again, Missi and Tice, very interesting stuff from Carlo. He also hit his free throws at 88%. A name to watch. And we all love a name to watch. Probably turns into nothing, but we do have to watch it. So who else was on this team that is worth mentioning? Well, their second-round pick, Antonio Reeves, was on the team. He's a Kentucky guard, but more of a Kentucky wing, who was picked in the second round, an older player who I just is not that interested. 22 minutes, 12 points. What did he hit his threes at? 32%, under 2 assists, like just nothing. They lost Najee Marshall, yes, but their team is still really deep with Herb Jones and Trey Murphy maybe coming off the bench. Reeves just won't play. I don't really have any worry about that. I wasn't impressed with Jordan Hawkins, honestly. But again, remember biases. I wasn't impressed with him pre-draft. I wasn't impressed with him last season. I just don't think he's going to turn into a good player. Maybe he does. I'm not sure. He tried some different things here, Jordan Hawkins. Won't say it worked out. He averaged under 20 fantasy points a game. He was outside the top 200 of summer league players. But he had 32 usage. 13 points with 2 assists and 1.2 threes, shooting 23% from 3 and 28% from the field. You are a second year lottery pick. You can't be shooting 23%. The usage is good, but like that's 13, 3, and 2 is miserable. And again, there is still no role for him. Murray, McCollum, Jones, Murphy, Alvarado. Yeah, Daniels is gone, but doesn't matter. There's no real role for Hawkins. I don't believe in him. That could easily end up being wrong. But he's also already 22. How old's Makovich, by the way? He's 23. I don't believe in Hawkins at all. I do believe in Joe Hendry, but I don't believe in Jordan Hawkins. What about Yves Missi, who I thought should have been picked higher in the draft, but I absolutely hated the fit here. The Pelicans needed a center, but Missi cannot do anything offensively, cannot space at all. So it's a terrible fit with Zion. And Missi struggled. 156 Yahoo points leagues. He averaged 8 points, 5 rebounds. The 2 blocks are nice. But he shot 46% from the field. There are a couple of good moments. He is very athletic. I worry a little bit about his wingspan. He can block shots, but overall, he's like a much, much worse Derek Lively. Now, if we get word that Yves Missi is going to be the starter, and he's going to play 22 minutes with Daniel Tice in the mix, then maybe we look at that as a field goal percentage, rebound, block-type streamer in category leagues only. Absolutely not in points. As you can see, he averaged 20 fantasy points in his 22 minutes or whatever it was here. 22 minutes, yeah. But was not super impressed. I think he could be a very good NBA center or a good enough NBA center. I just hate the fit on this team. And that's like the other guys on this team, the 2 Jordans, Ford and Hall. All right, cool. Isaiah Brockington, the big fella. Joey Hauser. Jermaine Cousinard. Not guys that I think we need to pay much mind to. We do have to pay attention to some of the San Antonio Spurs players. And let's start by talking about the number 4 overall pick, Steph Castle. Now, I'll tell you, I didn't see very much of Castle at Summer League. Because when his first game was on in Vegas, I was actually over in the other gym watching the game. I'll catch the Spurs the next time out. And then, of course, he didn't play again. He put up some good numbers through... Did they play in Utah or California? I can't remember. One of the pre-Vegas Summer Leagues they played. And Castle put up some good numbers. But he had a 34% usage, which is just not realistic for where he is this season. I don't think that Castle starts on this squad. I think it's Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Barnes, Sohan, Wembanyama. Maybe you could argue that Castle starts instead of Barnes, but Keldon Johnson and Julian Champagnie are there as well to be in that mix. One thing I do know is that Castle is not running at 34% usage. The big question, 2 main questions with Castle as a player. Is he a point guard? And can he shoot? They were the 2 main questions I had with him. Can he shoot? I don't think so. And nothing here proved that. 37%, 25 from 3, 67 from the line. That's all bad. A lot of players are bad. But he didn't disprove my thought that he can't shoot. Can he be a point guard? Not being able to shoot creates interesting challenges, but I thought him running this team looked pretty good. So I'm not going to rule out that he can become a starting point guard. 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 17 points, 34 usage, 1.3 steals. Is he an absolutely elite defender? I think he's a very good defender. I'm not sure he's going to be an elite defender. I think he's a very good defender. I also think that he's one of the guys that is prone to the most insane overreactions. Like, I put out some comments saying, look, maybe the Spurs think he could be Derek White. Derek White? What are you talking about? What about Kawhi, Butler, Drew Holiday? Like, bro. Sure. Do you know what's actually awesome? Like, maybe that's even me pushing him too far. But there's a lot of people that have anointed this man as a star already, and I'm not there on it. He looked good. He got to his spots, but it is, again, always worth remembering. Look who was on the team. Look at the usage that he was given because he was playing with Demoy Hodge and Tyson Ward, DJ Horn. Who's this bloke? Eugen Masalski, sorry. Jamari Bouye, who actually played a lot of the point guard role, not Castle. So, while there's some really good things here, the assist numbers are strong, and I liked him. His self-creation was really, really good. Some of the questions still are there. He could be a draftable fantasy player this season. I honestly don't think it's going to be worth it. And we'll see where we go. I would love to have just seen some more games from him through the Summer League. But hurt his wrist, and they were taking no risks with it, which I understand. So, who else was on this team? My man, Riley Minix, who I had as a second-round pick, didn't get drafted, but he did sign an Exhibit 10 deal with his team. 9 points for him in his 16 minutes. His other numbers don't really jump off the page, but 50% from three shooting does. He's a name to sort of watch, but he could just get lost in the mix of these interesting players like Goldfinger Charlie Bassey and Don Barlow, who amazingly remains unsigned, who just never sort of can crack through. Harrison Ingram was a second-round pick of the Spurs. He averaged 21 fantasy points, 10 points, 7 rebounds, 2 threes. He shot 41 from three, so that's good. But he is almost just the definition of a journeyman rotation player. Think of the like Trevion Grahams, Torrey Craigs. That's the sort of, not necessarily the exact same player, but that role where he sort of hangs around and he plays okay, but nothing that gets you excited. He's a weird-ish sort of player at times. He shot 39% from the free throw line, which is crazy. And we don't look at him too closely. Last year, in the second round, they took Sidi Sissoko, who I thought could have been a first-round pick. He didn't really do much last season. And in Summer League, he was like terrible. And that's, again, going back to like Castle doing everything because there was nobody in this team who could do anything else. 15 fantasy points for Sissoko. 18 usage, 6 points, 2 assists, 1 steal. He looks so far off the pace. He's only 20. He is still young. But the man shot 21%. 13% from three. He just looked terrible. The other one is Jamari Bouye, who's had some moments, I think, in Portland, but definitely with Miami. He looked in control. He averaged 3.5 assists and 2 steals. He's on a two-way with San Antonio as like a fourth-string point guard behind Trey Jones. Well, that's the other thing with Steph Castle, is that Trey Jones is the backup point guard. Chris Paul's the starting point guard. So Castle's not going to run as a point guard this season really much at all. Boye's a two-way guy. That he was okay, and he's the sort of player that you don't mind having on your Summer League team just to get guys into position and be like energetic and pass and just do impactful things. And I thought he did that. Not really sure there's ever going to be any sort of gigantic NBA role coming for him, though. And that's it. That's the Southwest Division. 2 more divisions to go for wrapping up NBA Summer League. What did you think of Reed Sheppard, of Steph Castle? What did you think of the Pelicans centers? I'm sure you didn't think anything of Dallas, to be honest. But there were really interesting prospects here. Cam Whitmore. What do you think of Zach Edey? I want to hear it down in the comments, which, of course, reside below. And while you're doing that, hit a thumb, subscribe, ring a bell, follow in all the different places. And, of course, guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.